Okay, looks like that is streaming. Mic's going. Let's just turn on that so we can highlight the mouse and jump right into it. Hello everybody, it's Mr. Barden here. I'm going to be going over a video that I'm going to do my best to keep short, but there are a few things I want to get through, so this may still end up being a little bit of a longer one. If you're watching this in order from what I've kind of posted and streamed bit by bit on my YouTube channel, you may remember that I said I was going to talk about how to host files online. However, a few things have updated. I just need a little more time to familiarize myself with these new updates before we get into that. So instead, I'm going to go over the next topic kind of on my list, which is talking about various kinds of effects and ways you can process that using the Tone library. And that'll be where we get into that. So I'm just gonna more or less jump into it, but before I do that, all the YouTube stuff, like, comment, subscribe, blah 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 blah. You get the thing. Okay. So there's a link to all of the stuff we're gonna do in the description below, including this page right here that I'm gonna talk about in just a second, the code, as well as some online textbook materials. Let me just actually pull that up. There we are. You got to see my bookmarks on my new tab, the sounds page, and we'll get into that, specifically audio effects. So this is what we're going to talk about as we go along here. Just double checking, things kind of got angry at me on the stream for a second, but now it looks like the internet's working again. Okay, so basically the core of everything is going to be the signal path. For the audio. And I kind of like to think of it as almost like a river. Okay, so your river starts at point A and ends at point B. All right, you can't stop it up and still have the river flow. Like if you put a dam in the middle of the river, it's going to stop the flow of the river and it's no longer going to get to B. Right? It's kind of a vague analogy. I didn't prepare any diagrams to help with that. But generally the same thing is how audio works in terms of processing. We want a continuous stream of data and a stream of information. If you think back to just how sound works in general, it's a traveling wave from A to B in terms of molecules bumping into each other and bouncing off to form this repeated pattern of high and low pressure. So we have to take our audio source and connect it from A to B to C to D to however many steps there are until it finally gets to the sound output so we can hear it. We've already done this already by connecting this to the destination speakers. This graphic is actually a little bit out of date now. We need to update it. They've changed some of the names of things, but basically we have to connect it using certain methods until we finally get to the final output. And again, I've got a lot of examples here, and there's a link to this in the textbook. We're gonna kind of skim through this as we go. So again, link right here down below. Definitely recommend checking this out. So with this code, it already has Tone loaded up, and what I'm going to do is just set up some playback of an audio sound, and we're going to then start inserting audio effects into the pathway, so that way we can start altering what our sounds sound like. So to do that, I'm going to make a new player object. Player is going to be a new tone.player. And then let's see, there it is. I already have a sound file loaded in, and so this will be we are vase plus hit 02.mp3. There we are. And oops. So there we are, one too many. So I've loaded this up. If we play it, run the code, nothing's too crazy happening, no errors. There we go. Shouldn't be anything new. In order to play our sound, we just need to talk to our player and start the sound. And I can't spell. There we are. So if I run this, we're not getting any errors. I'm clicking the mouse. You can see that on the screen, but we aren't hearing anything. As of right now, we do not have the signal pathway from A to B. We have the source, the spring that's spawning the river, but it's still blocked off. The river doesn't flow to the sound source. So there's a few different ways we can go about it. So far, I've used kind of the easiest one, which is just adding, after you make the dot player object, we can say dot to destination, and that's a method. If I could type, there we are. I'll just add a little more space here. And now, if I refresh this and we click this, you should hear it. Again, I'm not doing anything with the volume, so I'm warning you now. I'm going to start playing some sounds. So if you have the volume up really loud in your headphones, you may want to turn it down just until you know how loud it is on your device. All right, here we go. According to my streaming software, you can hear that, and it was kind of loud. It's turned down in my speakers, but again, just be aware of that going forward. I'm not going to adjust any volumes with this. So that's going to be the default every time we play a sound. But you should have now heard a sound. And that's that. We've now set up the pathway to go from the sound source to the destination with no changes. There are a few other ways we could do this, and I'll do it kind of this longer way just for the sake of being clear. And so we'll be able to do all that. So in setup, what we can do is we can just say, tone.destination. And this will do the same thing. Play the sounds back. Why is my stream acting up? Okay, now it looks like it might be going again. Maybe. Okay, now it looks like it's going again. Internet's being a little weird today as I do this, and I don't feel like re-recording this later. But anyways, we've got our setup here. We've just kind of blown out the just to destination method into a longer version. So we're just manually connecting this with the connect method instead. All right, let's just put a pin in this and talk about something else, and then we'll come back and keep coding. So I mentioned this before. This is on the side here are all the general categories of stuff. So we have a bunch of objects and things like that up at the top, or classes technically for different objects, and then some functions and things like that. So you can do some things. I actually don't use this a ton. I mostly use the classes, but they're all broken up into different categories. So up at the top are kind of the main ones that make up the core of the library. It's labeled as core. And then there are more things that are kind of built out of that when you start combining this with the sources and other things. So we can add some oscillators and things like that. The player objects. These are, again, things dealing with generating or playing back sound from the source. When we start combining those, we can start getting into instruments, which deal with synthesizers and things like that. We'll play around with that in another video shortly following this one. But we can also get things like effects, which can alter the sound from playback and synthesizers. Components are, I would classify these as another kind of effect, but it's a little more vague. There's some other things, so you can get some compressors. We can get gates, waveforms. That isn't really controlling the volume. It's not really an effect, but some of these kind of fall into there. It's just ways of working with the sound and shaping the sound into what we want. All right, signal. Again, ways to work with altering signals, so you can do absolute values, converting. Again, that's just a really general overview. But basically what I'm going to focus on for now are the effects. I may periodically jump into the components, but generally the effects are where we'll start for today. So again, these all do different things. You may have heard of some of these before. If you were to jump into the textbook page. There are a few things here, and I've again talked about some of this, and we're going to be talking about a few more of the parts of this as we go. But I'm kind of going through several common effects, so you can explore this if you want, but you can play a sound, you can hear it with the effect or some mix of that. We'll talk about the sliders in a second, and you can adjust a parameter of it so that way you can hear how it changes. So I got a reverb, delay, some distortion, tremolos, a bit crusher effect, pitch shifting, chorus. What else is in here? And then we get into working with sliders and things like that. So a lot of this is in the tone reference here, but basically, let's say you wanted to find an effect. Let me just kind of look in here. We've got some automatic filters, panning, wah, a bit crusher, Chebyshev is a kind of filter, chorus, distortion, some feedback, delays, reverbs, shifting, another kind of reverb, some effects. I'm just scrolling through the list. It updates periodically with new stuff, or they change other things. So let's work with a delay, because I think that's pretty clear to hear. So feedback delay. If you click on that, you can see a bunch of stuff with this class. So this shows you kind of how you can set it up in order to work. So you have to make it a new tone.feedback delay, and then you can give it some arguments, and then there's some other stuff. And in this case, we have a basically they're just making a synthesizer and connecting it to the delay, and then to the, so we can hear it and do all the stuff. So that can be useful. Sometimes this isn't for every effect, but you can sometimes run this for an example. So there was the effect there. Okay. Boom. So let's just scroll down. So under here we have a few different things. We just looked at the constructor, the how we make it, but here we have all of the properties and the methods. So again, you can set the properties using the equal sign operator here, and then you can use the methods. And again, these have these, and you can give them arguments and things like that. So again, we can there's the constructor, how we make it, some properties you can set, and things like that. So here we get into properties. So let's see, block time, channel count. I'm looking for something we might actually want to use. Delay time here is the how long the delay works. If you hover over this, you can see certain types of parameters and things like that, and it'll kind of describe it, and you can get a whole other page about stuff. So this is all about parameters and things like that. Some things are read only, feedback. If it's a normal range, that's just a value between 0 and 1. Time is, well, about time. So in this case, it'd be 0% or 100% of the signal that's fed into the feedback effect. And again, if you were to hover over that, you can see it's talking about, this just looks like a parameter again. Again, just kind of scrolling through here, because there's a few other kinds of values. So I'm just looking for a normal range again. We're getting into methods now. We do get into, with some of these, there are some certain little aspects in terms of sampling rates and things like that. So if you ever see that something is a signal or things like that, I'm trying to look. They've updated this semi-recently, so it's changed a little bit. But sometimes you have to add an extra line of commands just to use a thing in this, or a property or a method. I'm not seeing it right now being set up. Trying to check. Yeah, we'll get to that when we start making things. But anyway, just sometimes there can be some. Here we go. Signal. So this says signal. right here under room size. This is what I was looking for. I'm in the JC reverb effect, and basically when it's a signal, we have to show that whatever the current value is every sample. Again, it's happening at the signal rate. So by default, 44,100 times every second, we're checking this value and it's updating in real time as needed. So sometimes, if it ever says it's a signal, sometimes the parameters as well, like we saw before, you may need to add an extra command, the specific value property, and I'll make a delay to start with. So I like to do it like this. There's no real right or wrong way. Technically, you can make everything in setup. That's totally fine. I like to kind of condense all my stuff into little chunks, so that way parts of my code all kind of do the same thing, and we move on to the next part that all handles things. So we, preload here is going to be loading all the sounds. I'm also going to use it to make the audio effects. Again, you don't have to. I just like to, because then it's all there and done before the rest of the code works. So delay is going to be a new tone dot capital feedback delay. So when we make audio effects, sometimes we want some kind of default values. So let me go back to feedback delay. So when we make the feedback delay, if you look in the constructor, the arguments, we have the delay time and the feedback amount. We won't worry about that. So the time, there's a few different ways to represent time. It can be in milliseconds or with a like to a beat of the music. So if we have a clock running, which is something we'll get to with sequences, you can be like, oh, every 8th note, and it'll sync up to that clock. For now, I'm going to talk about using milliseconds, but I just want to double check to do property delay time. Just the amount of time. So for this, we'll say 500 milliseconds, and we'll put in 8 or not 80, 0.8 because it's normal range 0 to 1, so 80% of that. Boom. So we've added that, and these are the default values. We can change and update this at any time, and we'll get into that. But for now, this will just be a static effect. So now we want to connect this into the signal pathway. We've made the object, but it's not connected. So if our river is going from A to B, this is some other thing. We have to take it and stick it into the pathway. So now it's A to B to C. So let's do that. So we have our player.connect, but no, we're not going to connect this to the destination now. We're going to connect the player to delay. So that's the first bit. We can connect our delay. Now this one will go to the tone.destination. This is kind of important here. So I've alleviated a little bit of a problem by making everything and then connecting it down below. This is avoiding a bit of a order issue by doing it this way. But I'm going to say here we would run into an error because and you can totally do this up here. This is totally fine. I'm just expanding it out into separate lines for the sake of showing you a more expanded way to do it. But this is a condensed way, but we run into an issue. If you remember, in each function, they get executed from top to bottom. That's totally fine. This is just normal. But because we are trying to connect this to the delay before we have made the delay, you will run into an error. So I'd like to build my stuff in reverse order. So I'll start at the speakers and then go to the work my way back through the effect chain until I get to the sounds. So a lot of times my code will look like this, and this will be totally fine. Connect that dot to destination. So if I were just commented that out, run this will totally be fine because we are making the delay, connecting that to the speakers, and then making the player connecting that to the delay. Again, we have to make the object before we can do anything with it. All right, so if I were to refresh this and click, now we should hear this with a delay. All right, so we can hear that. It's going to go on until it fades off, but you'll notice that it's only 80% of the volume each time because I told it to be 80%. One thing, if you set it to 100 or 1 in this second argument for a delay like this, it will just go on forever. So I almost always pick something less than 1. And if you pick 0, obviously you won't hear anything. But that's the one way we can connect it up. I'm going to switch it up back to my other stuff. Other way, I should say. Just like so. Comment that. So the process is essentially the same for making other things. So I'll add a reverb, and I'll put the reverb at the beginning of the end of the effect chain. Reverb equals new Tone.js reverb. So if I were to go up here and find JC reverb, let's see what we have on the constructor. We just need to have the room size. So basically, the bigger the room size, the more the reverb. So let's just say 0.7. All right. So we got that there. So now we can go in and say reverb dot connect tone dot destination, like that, and then we'll instead connect the delay to the reverb. So now if I run this again, no errors. I click the mouse. It's in a much more reverby space, kind of sounds a lot more echoey, different than the initial one. And this can be done as many times as you want. I'm going to add one more just for the sake of this demo. So let's add a ping. No, I already did a delay. Let's do the vibrato here. So we just need the frequency and the depth here. So So add a vibrato, new tone dot vibrato, and we need frequency and depth. So this is I'm just going to give this a frequency of, I don't know, 15 times a second. Depth, that's normal range, 0.7 again. Get that right there, and then I'll stick the vibrato here in the delay chain, or in the effect chain. Vibrato dot connect. So we'll connect you into the vibrato, and then into the delay, and everything else is the same. So now that I've inserted this will sound a little bit different. Here we go. All right, so you get the idea. We can start changing and adjusting sounds. These are, again, based off of these parameters here that we set. You can change them up as needed. Just depends. You can do it in real time or have it all just set and be a thing. Before we get into that, though, I'm just going to show you one more way to connect everything up. I like doing this, but you have to plan some stuff out. So basically, I'm going to just comment these. And we'll go to player dot chain. So chain is very useful when you already have multiple effects and you know that you want to, well, chain them one after the other to form your signal pathway. So what I can do is we're going to talk to the player object and we're going to chain it using this method. And each argument is just the name of the objects you want to send the signal to in the order that you want to send them. So to do the exact same thing, we'll say vibrato, delay, reverb, tone dot destination. So now we're going to send the output of the player through this thing in this order, and we'll hear the exact same thing as what I did on these 4 lines. There we go. So it's the exact same thing, only now it's on a single line. That's why I like using chain if I have multiple stops along the path. Okay, so that's that. Let's get into adjusting a parameter in real time. I'm only going to do one for the sake of not having a super long video. I mean, it's already gone on for 30 minutes. So this will kind of be the last thing we do here. Just know that you can apply this to every parameter we've talked about, and in the effects page here, you'll be able to see what we've done. So again, I've talked a bit about this already, and then in the audio effects, we're about to do all of this right here. So if you wanted to follow this or explore some of these things more, there's a ton of examples for you to work with. So let's work with a delay, the delay effect. So basically, I'm going to start by making a new slider. So I'm going to just go down on my setup function. Actually, I got to make this global first. So I don't know. Delay slider, so I'm going to call this. I say slider, yeah, slide. I'm going to be a create slider, and that's a function, capital S. There we are. So again, when we make a slider, I went over this real briefly in my other videos. I'm going to go through it in more. I wanted to make things vertical over horizontal, but I'm going to leave things horizontal now. For this, we need a few arguments. The first is the minimum value of the slider. The next is the maximum value of the slider. So let's say 1. I think that's what we'll start with, 0 to 1, normal range. Good place to work with. You'll have to look at your various types of things. Actually, let me jump back into feedback delay. So delay time. Right there, it's a parameter. So give me 0 to 1. And if we're working in milliseconds instead of 0 to 1, let's say 1,000. So once we've got that, then we need the step size. Actually, no. Am I getting the orders backwards? Is it step size or starting position next? I don't want to tell you something wrong, so I'm going to double check. Okay, it's the starting value next. So you don't need this, but basically the third argument, if you add one, is whatever the slider will start on whenever the sketch loads. So I'll keep that at 500. And then the last one is the step size. So if you wanted to set it so the slider moves in certain increments and kind of has little stops along the way. So maybe if I did 100, and I were to run this, here's our slider, and it'll kind of jump to 100s. I forgot that was set to do the mouse. Or if I set it to 0, it will kind of freely swap. And that's the one I'm going to leave it on for now. Okay, I'm going to refresh that. Okay, so I've made my slider. I'm also going to position this. So slide dot position. This is a method, and it's just X and Y location on the canvas. HEIGHT. Boom, I'll stick that there. I forgot that's the starting point, so minus 100. is 75. That's all a little more. 85. Wrong way. That's approximately half. I'm not going to fine tune it for right now. But know that if you want to have your sliders on the canvas, you notice by default it was below here. So going on here. So this will be delay time divided by 2. And I'm just going to leave that right there. So this will be adjusting the delay time. This isn't how I would normally do it, but I'm just going to leave it so I trigger this with the mouse. Know that you can do it with buttons or keyboard presses, but for the sake of time, I'm going to leave it there. So I've now made the slider, adjusted its position, given it a label. Again, by default, that's just how they are. They do not have labels, so you'll have to add one in. So that's what I did there. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to assign this to be a value. So we're going to talk to the parameter first, delay dot room size dot value. So whenever anything here says parameter, or if it says signal, those are the main ones. Signal here, you have to add the dot value, I guess, sub parameter to whatever you're wanting to work with. If it doesn't say that, so like let's say we wanted to adjust the sample. Oh, we get to read only. We want to adjust something, so I guess number of output. No, that's read only. I picked 2 read onlys. Okay, just the input. We would just say dot input like so, and we would assign it to be a value. But we aren't working with that. We're working with the actually, yeah, I'll leave it as room. No, it's not room size. It's was it room size? Delay time. Delay time dot value. And again, the reason we're doing this is because every frame we are, working with this value. It has to, reset and adjust for the signal rate. I'm not going to get too much into how computers work. Just know that if it's, oh, look, it reconnected. Cool. That one seemed to be an OBS problem and not an internet problem. But now we have this here. Oop, and then I've messed up a range there, so must be within 0 and 500. So let's adjust this slider. So 0 and 500. We'll make the default one 100. So now if I run this again, boom, you notice the slider's in a different spot. If I click it, because we are taking the current value of the slider and assigning it to be the delay time of the delay, we should hear that the delay is a lot faster instead of duh, duh. It's more like duh, duh, duh. We'll hear it. So that's as we adjust this, you're hearing the delay change, and that's altering the sound in other ways. But we're changing this bit by. There we go. And wet is just if a sound is considered dry, it has no effect applied to it, and if it's wet, it is, and that's usually a ratio. So if we set wet to 100, well, there. I'm going to put this back to delay time, just to leave that as it is. And that's going to kind of be everything. This was a very unstructured, unplanned video. I just kind of sat here and started talking, and I've covered all the things. So again, just to briefly reiterate all of this. We can make our sounds and players. You want to kind of build them in reverse order, especially if you're connecting them all right on the same line where you make it. You can avoid some of this being a problem if you manually connect them all on separate lines down below. But I recommend using the chain effect just to save space. Both of these are totally fine. I'll leave this one commented out. Or you could just, when you make it, say dot connect to blah 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 and build it up right here. But if you do that, you need to do it in reverse order because you have to make the object before you can connect anything to it. So even though you, as the coder, know that you've made all the stuff and it's coded right, the computer has to go through things in order, and you can't, drive to Walmart to go buy stuff if the Walmart doesn't exist. So that's why you need to do that. You can also make sliders using the create slider, and again, it's minimum, maximum, default, and then step size. And then you just have to give it a position and a label, and then you can connect it by talking to whatever parameter you want to adjust and assigning it using the slider's current value. But you have to do this in the draw loop because we need to continually check and update it. Because otherwise it'll just set it initially and it won't ever update again. So if you don't put a line like this in the draw function, it'll never update. So that's kind of important. And then the last thing I have here is just starting the sound. You do not want to put this in the draw loop because it'll try to trigger it every frame, and that'll be a problem. So that's why I have this in a separate function right here. All right, that's just about everything, condensed it into just a bit. This code, the other pages are all in the description below, so explore those however you will. This is going to be the end of my video. If you liked it, do the like. If you learned something, subscribe, blah, 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 all the things. If anything wasn't clear, you have questions or want to explore something else, put that in the comments. And yeah, I'll see you all next time I see you. Bye.